Anyway, joining us now to discuss this and so much more, there's so many questions that he wants answered, is Matt Gaetz of Florida, member of the Freedom Caucus. And, Matt, welcome back to the program.
Good to be back on, Sean. And the important context for so many of these issues is that this is what Russia does around the world. They go and make things up about people running for office, and then they use that to discredit the institution of democracy. But the real story here is that Russia's willing partner was inevitably the Democratic National Committee. And as a consequence of some of the revelations in the Simpson testimony, it appears that the FBI was using some of the same tactics that Russia uses around the world. I mean, we had Peter Strzok, who was, communicating with his mistress, Lisa Page, about leaking information, from this dossier, from other things to the Wall Street Journal. And it just shows that the real collusion here was not with the Trump campaign.
All right, let's go to, because there's so many unanswered questions. Is there one single thing that we now know about this dossier a year later? And in other words, was any one thing proven from that phony Hillary Clinton DNC paid dossier?
Not a thing. And, the left, they love to go back and forth on Comey. They think Comey's a hero when he says something bad about the president. But when Comey says that this dossier was salacious and unverified, all of a sudden Democrats don't want to take his word for it. So there's nothing in this that we would say we could verify based on anything. The trouble is the FBI won't tell us whether or not they used this campaign document as an intelligence document. That should trouble all of us.
Okay, but it's even more important than that. And I spoke to 3 separate sources yesterday that when the Department of Justice late last week finally agreed to give information to the House Intelligence Committee, now I'm getting varying degrees in terms of how much the dossier played as it relates to, what role did the dossier play in acquiring the FISA warrant. Some people said it played a significant role, and others say it just played a role, but everybody says that dossier was used to get that FISA warrant.
Well, we asked the question of the Attorney General, and it's really frustrating to me that he wouldn't answer it and settle that critical question.
But we now, according to all my sources and Sarah Carter, we know it played at least a role, if not a significant one. What does that mean?
Well, and that makes sense. It makes sense, Sean. The reason it makes sense is that, there's 2 narratives out there, right? There's the narrative that George Papadopoulos gets drunk in a London pub and runs his mouth about Putin hating Hillary Clinton, and that launches some massive intelligence investigation. Or you've got a situation where the wife of a senior official at the Department of Justice gets hired by a firm looking to get paid by the Democratic Party and potentially the FBI, and that is the basis for the FISA warrant. So, of course, that is the most logical outcome. What it would mean is that we have crossed the Rubicon on the impartiality of the FBI. If the FBI is willing to take a political campaign opposition research document and use that to try to go...
Have you not, in your position, been able to corroborate, as we have, that, in fact, it was at least used in part to gather that FISA warrant?
Well, Sean, I've got to be careful because some of the information we've received has been in a confidential setting. I can tell you that all of the information... You
know what you could say? You could say, Hannity, as usual, you're hanging and hovering above the target.
Hannity, as usual, you're hanging and hovering above the target.
But the sad thing is, let's talk about how profound this is. That if that bought and paid for Hillary Clinton propaganda dossier with all that salacious material that was printed a year ago by BuzzFeed, but, the impact we're talking about now, that's a FISA court. That means the court was lied to. That was bought and paid for political information used to get a warrant against a president-elect and a candidate and his team. I mean,
you're right that issues of prosecutorial misconduct very well may be implicated here. But to me, the thing that should, raise the hair on the neck of every American is that unelected people thought that their viewpoint was more important, was better, was more virtuous than the will of the American voters who elected Donald Trump. And this didn't just happen before his election. They were still trying to discredit him with this dossier after the election. I mean, it's always something. It's either, he didn't win, or he only won because of Jill Stein. He only won because of the Russians. Now they're saying, he's won, but they don't think he's mentally stable. The left is in total meltdown mode because while they create these distractions, we are cutting taxes, reforming government, and getting the economy moving again.
All right,
That's what this president should be able to do.
But here's what the American people have been told vis-a-vis the New York Times. They say that what triggered the Trump-Russia investigation was this guy Papadopoulos. Now, Matt, I don't know if you know it, but I was pretty active and involved in hanging around all the campaigns like a gnat you can't get rid of. And I knew everybody that was involved. I know Paul Manafort. I know Corey Lewandowski. I knew Hope Hicks. I knew Steve Bannon, Kellyanne Conway. I knew them all. Steve Miller. I knew everybody in the course of this campaign. I never heard of a guy named Papadopoulos until this all comes up. But the New York Times would have the American people believe in what is nothing but quadruple hearsay. In other words, that a guy in Russia tells a guy in London who tells Papadopoulos, who tells an Australian diplomat, who tells the FBI. And that triggered the investigation. I don't believe that.
Of course not. That is a ludicrous proposition, especially when the alternative fact pattern is that Fusion GPS went and hired Nellie Orr, the wife of Bruce Orr, and then the FBI had become so politicized under the Obama administration that they were literally valeting information bought by the Democratic National Committee to a FISA court to get permission to spy on their political enemies. That's what we're talking about, and it's the biggest scandal in the 2016 election.
All right, let's move on, because we don't know which was given more weight, but it's certainly, I think, the Australian ambassador story, that would never meet the smell. Do you understand that if we go for hearsay, that is not admissible in any court? In other words, no FBI official in their right mind would ever justify a criminal probe of anyone based on that type of hearsay? And more importantly, what is the status of the judiciary investigation into the text messages? Doesn't everything seem to connect to Peter Strzok and his mistress girlfriend?
It really does, and it's just not a coincidence that Peter Strzok is central to the Hillary Clinton investigation and then migrates over to persecute Donald Trump while he is bringing with him not only a sense of bias, but an action plan. He was going to be the insurance policy. He was going to be the James Bond that was going to save America from Donald Trump by leaking information and going and curating lies about the president. It's truly despicable that he was able to undermine our democracy in such a critical way, both in the Hillary Clinton investigation and in the Donald Trump investigation. The Judiciary Committee is involved in taking sworn testimony. As you know, we interviewed Andrew McCabe. Days later, he announced his retirement.
Oh, by the way, Andrew McCabe's senior attorney and legal advisor was Lisa Page.
Absolutely. And one of the problems we have in this case, Sean, is that the attorneys who were fact witnesses were allowed to sit in the interviews. And so everybody was able to get their story straight when normally you would never do that. I mean, at a municipal police department, every single detective knows that you would never do that. But here at the highest levels of the FBI, you've got people doing favors for each other, creating an environment where you couldn't get prosecutions, you couldn't get evidence against Hillary Clinton. And then when we could possibly get evidence, everybody was given an immunity deal, and no facts were proffered as a consequence. So we're going to have an Inspector General's report in our hands. I think that will be very soon. It could be this month or next. And I think that it's really going to detail the extent to which there was a pro-Hillary Clinton bias, an anti-Donald Trump bias, and there was an infection of both investigations.
Well, I hear it's even going to get worse than that. In other words, that, people that were actually corroborating information in the dossier were all Hillary Inner Circle people. Have you heard any of that?
Well, frankly, I haven't heard of a single piece of credible corroboration.
All right, then let me ask you this. If James Comey and Peter Strzok are writing an exoneration of Hillary on the email server scandal, months before they ever even interview the main people involved in the case, including Hillary and 17 other prominent people, doesn't that sound to you like a rigged investigation by Strzok and Comey? And that's when they changed the word from the legal standard gross negligence. Is that a rigged investigation? Sounds rigged to me.
Well, it's completely rigged. Hillary Clinton was never in any jeopardy of facing consequences as a result of her conduct. Any other American who had mishandled classified information would have had a different process and a different outcome. But Hillary Clinton got a special process, and she got a special outcome, and that is what has undermined the rule of law. And it's just indicative of the extent to which, during the Obama administration, the highest levels of our government at Justice and at the FBI were infected with political bias.
All right, stay right there. We'll come back. Matt Gaetz is with us, Freedom Caucus member, and he's asking all the right questions. All right, so now that we know that it played a role, and now we saw Dianne Feinstein leaking as she did, and then we've got Michael Cohen, the attorney, former attorney for the president at Trump Tower. Now he's suing BuzzFeed and Fusion GPS over defamation. When is the public ever going to get to see this? Do we ever get to see the truth?
Well, we need to, Sean, and one of the concerns I've had is that too many of the interviews and examinations of witnesses have been behind closed doors with members of Congress. Now, I'm kind of new to Congress. I don't know what the traditions and rules are.
Yeah, you're like the rookie that's batting 400 in his first year. I kind of appreciate that.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, Sean, but I just think that transparency is going to be the best antidote to this corruption and really this bad conduct we've seen at the highest levels of our government. So I've been pushing for more open hearings, open testimony. Frankly, if Glenn Simpson and Dianne Feinstein wanted to have an open hearing where he told his side of the story, I think we should have accommodated that. What's crazy is that we had the Senate chose to have a confidential hearing, and then Dianne Feinstein decides to release the transcripts. Apparently, did you see this, Sean? Because she had a cold.
I saw that earlier today. Yeah, poor Di-Fi had a cold, so she didn't check with Chuck Grassley. Isn't it?
I mean, like, the nerve of the left to say that Donald Trump is, like, unstable for office, but Dianne Feinstein releases these transcripts without even talking to the committee chairman because she has a cold. Let's hope she doesn't get the flu. She might set up her own email server.
Oh, my gosh, that's pretty darn funny. All right, I think we're going to get a lot of news on this in the next week, so I'm keeping focused. I hope you guys in Congress, the few of you that are doing your job, stay focused on it. Matt Gaetz, appreciate it. Thanks for being with us.